My friends, let us come together for a few moments, in a spirit of quietness, not seeking anything, not attempting to gain anything, but simply becoming receptive. For all true spiritual work begins in silence, not the silence that is the absence of sound, but the silence that is the absence of mental striving. When the mind no longer pushes, when it no longer grasps for answers, solutions, or even spiritual experiences, a deeper activity begins to take place within us, and it is this activity that reveals the presence that has been with us from the beginning. We have lived so long believing that thinking is our guiding power, that the intellect is our instrument of progress, that we approach even our spiritual journey with the hope that some thought, some affirmation, some mental position might lift us into harmony. But harmony does not come from the mind. Truth does not enter through the door of intellect, and God is never found through the processes of thought. If thinking could reveal God, every scholar would walk the earth illumined, and every philosopher would stand in perpetual peace. Yet we know this is not so. In our work, we must come to understand a simple, profound truth. When thinking stops, real power begins. Not the power of man, not the power of mind, not the power of effort, but the power of the invisible presence that is ever seeking to reveal itself as our very life. This presence does not rush in because we demand it. It does not respond because we outline it or reason our way toward it. It reveals itself in the very moment we release the belief that we must accomplish something. And so, as we begin today, let us rest in the awareness that there is nothing to attain and nothing to achieve. Let us be still, not as a discipline, but as a recognition that all that God is already here, and that whatever unfolds in this hour will not come through words or ideas, but through the deeper realization that flows from silence. We are not preparing the mind to think more clearly. We are quieting the mind so that a greater wisdom may make itself known. If, in these moments, you can simply relax the inner tension and cease the perpetual movement of thought, even for a breath, you will discover that something within you begins to stir, something gentle, something living, something real. And that, my friends, is the beginning of spiritual power. Now, as we proceed, let us take a deeper look at this mind with which we have been so identified. For centuries we have honored the human mind as though it were a divine instrument, believing that through its powers of reason, memory, imagination, and analysis, we could find our way to peace, security, or even spiritual revelation. And yet, it is this same mind that has led us into fear, confusion, and conflict. It is this mind that sees opposites everywhere, good and evil, sickness and health, abundance and lack, and then struggles to reconcile what it has itself divided. Let us understand this gently and without judgment. The human mind is not a villain. It is simply a limited instrument. It can function beautifully in the world of time and space, balancing accounts, reading books, organizing daily affairs, but it cannot enter the kingdom of God. It cannot grasp the infinite. It cannot comprehend the reality of spirit. For the mind knows only contrast, and spirit knows only oneness. The mistake we have made is not in using the mind for daily tasks. The mistake has been in trusting the mind for spiritual living. We have tried to think our way into God, and this cannot be done. The mind may hold high ideals. It may recite scripture. It may memorize principles. It may perform all sorts of mental gymnastics. But all of this remains within the realm of thought, and truth does not dwell there. Hear this well. The mind can only deal with images formed from the past, impressions gathered from the senses, conclusions drawn from appearances. It cannot perceive reality. And so every solution that originates in the mind is built upon the very appearances we are attempting to transcend. The mind sees the appearance of lack and then tries to think its way into abundance. The mind sees disease and attempts to affirm health. The mind sees danger and attempts to generate courage. Yet all of this is but effort based on the belief that appearances carry power. That is why in our work we never attempt to fix appearances with thought. We do not fight shadows. We do not use truth as a weapon. Instead, we release the mind from its imaginary burden of solving the world, for the mind was never ordained to heal, to prosper, or to save. These are the activities of the spirit alone. When you recognize the limitations of the human mind, not as condemnation but as simple spiritual fact, a great relaxation takes place within you. You no longer push the mind to perform tasks that lie outside its nature. You no longer attempt to reason your way into peace. You simply see that the mind is not the channel through which spiritual power flows. And in that recognition, the mind gently grows quiet, not by force, but through understanding. It is only when the mind becomes still that we begin to sense the gentle movement of something greater than ourselves. Only where the limited yields does the infinite reveal itself. And this is where our journey truly begins, in the humble acknowledgement that the human mind, with all its brilliance, cannot lead us to God, and therefore we must let it rest. As the mind grows still, even for a moment, we begin to sense that something else is present, something that does not originate in thought, something that is not the product of effort or intention. This presence does not shout, it does not persuade, it does not enter through argument or logic. It reveals itself quietly, gently, as though it has been waiting for us to cease our striving so that it might be recognized. This, my friends, is real power. Real power is not the capacity to change outer conditions. It is not the strength to push, to force, or to compel. Real power is the silent, unseen activity of spirit, the invisible presence that governs, sustains, and fulfills all creation. And it is always present, never arriving, never departing, never withholding itself from any person. The only veil is the activity of our own mind. Human power is rooted in effort. Mental power is rooted in thought. But spiritual power is rooted in being in the simple, profound fact that God, the infinite invisible, is the substance and life of all that is. When we speak of God, we are not speaking of a deity far away, not a superhuman mind making decisions in some distant realm. We are speaking of a living presence, a divine activity that is the very essence of our own being. This presence does not need our thoughts in order to function. It does not require our mental direction. It does not respond to persuasion or pleading. In fact, it is when we cease all such efforts that its activity becomes apparent. You see, there is a vast difference between the letter of truth and the spirit of truth. The letter consists of words, concepts, metaphysical statements, and beautiful principles, but they are still words. The spirit is the living reality to which those words point. And no matter how many times we repeat the letter, it cannot produce the spirit. The spirit reveals itself only when we turn inward in receptivity, when we stop trying to make truth true and simply allow it to be what it is. Real power is the activity of this presence. Real power is the operation of spirit as your life, your intelligence, your being. And so, when you feel the stillness within, even for a second, do not attempt to grasp it with the mind. Do not attempt to define it, analyze it, or hold it. Simply acknowledge God is here. In that recognition, without further effort, a subtle shift begins to occur. Problems that seemed heavy lose their weight. Fears that felt overwhelming begin to dissolve. What you formerly believed required action or demonstration now reveals itself as already fulfilled. This is not because you have done anything. It is because you have ceased interfering with the operation of grace. For grace is always functioning. Grace is the eternal activity of God, and it is only in the absence of mental striving that grace becomes visible. This is why all true spiritual healing comes, not from thought, but from the recognition of this presence. Real power is the presence itself, and the presence is realized when thought is still. As we move further into this unfolding, let us look carefully at something that is often misunderstood by sincere spiritual seekers. When a truth is revealed to us, perhaps the truth of oneness or the truth of God's presence, we naturally feel drawn to hold it, to repeat it, to think it continually. And there is no condemnation in that. It is the instinctive attempt of the human mind to grasp what it has tasted. But we must see clearly that thinking truth is not the same as realizing truth. Thinking is a mental activity. Realization is a spiritual experience. The moment we begin to work with truth mentally, trying to remember principles, holding on to statements, rehearsing passages, you will notice a certain tension enters the practice. You become aware of a subtle strain as if you are trying to keep hold of something. That strain itself is the sign that the mind has taken over. And once the mind becomes active in this way, the flow of grace is interrupted. We are not to use truth as though it were a tool we could wield against appearances. We are not here to fight sickness with the idea of health or lack with the idea of abundance. For when you approach truth as something to think, something to apply, something to manipulate, you are quietly affirming that the appearance has power and that your thought must oppose it. This is the greatest obstruction to spiritual realization. The infinite way reveals a profound principle. Any time you attempt to think your way out of a problem, you are still believing in the reality of the problem. And where belief in a problem exists, the activity of grace cannot be felt, not because grace is absent, but because thought has built a barrier through which the conscious awareness of grace cannot penetrate. Let us understand this gently. It is not wrong to think. It is simply ineffective for spiritual work. Intellectual truth is still on the level of the mind, and the mind operates entirely within the realm of appearances. The mind sees a condition, judges it, labels it, and then uses truth to try to overcome it. But truth, used in this way, becomes the letter beautiful, inspiring, and utterly impotent. Truth has no power when confined to thought. It is only when we stop thinking about truth that truth becomes alive within us. It is only when we release the mind from its attempt to use truth that the spirit itself reveals truth. In that moment of release, the mind falls silent and the presence begins its activity. You see, realization comes not because we recite or repeat truth, but because we become still enough for truth to reveal itself. The truth that heals, the truth that harmonizes, the truth that frees, does not arise from the mind. It arises from the deep well of silence within the presence that is closer to us than breathing. Let the mind stop wrestling with truth. Let it stop trying to remember, to affirm, to hold. Let it be still. In that quietness, you will feel the gentle, living movement of spirit saying, I am here. And that is the moment when grace begins to flow, not through thinking, but through being. Now, let us come to one of the great jewels of the spiritual life, the sacred pause. In our human experience, we have become so accustomed to movement, to reaction, to answering every appearance with a thought, a plan, or a judgment, that the simplest act of pausing seems almost unnatural. And yet, this pause is the doorway through which we step out of the realm of the senses and into the sanctuary of spirit. You see, there is a moment, a very quiet moment, in which the entire activity of the human mind can be allowed to rest, not forced, not repressed, not controlled, but gently set aside, as though you were laying down a heavy garment that you no longer need to wear. This moment may be only a breath in duration, or it may widen into minutes, but its power is not measured in time. Its power lies in the fact that in that pause, you stop living from the mind and begin living from the presence. The sacred pause is not a technique. It is not something you do. It is the simple recognition, I will not proceed until I have felt something of the presence within. In that instant, you turn away from the problem, from the condition, from the thought process that has occupied your attention. You release the urge to correct, to solve, to interpret, and you allow yourself to become inwardly spacious, receptive, open. In that pause, no thought is required, no truth must be remembered, no effort must be made, for this is not a mental practice, it is an act of surrender. It is the willingness to stand without defenses, without opinions, without personal will, and to let the infinite invisible reveal itself. As you enter this inner quiet, you may become aware of a subtle shift, perhaps, a sense of lightness or peace, or the simple awareness of being present. But do not cling to these sensations. They are only signs that the mind is receding. What you are seeking is not a feeling, not an experience, but the recognition of the presence that has always been here. We pause, not to achieve anything, but to step aside so that grace may take over. In the sacred pause, we enter the inner sanctuary, the temple not made with hands. Here, no prayer of words is spoken. Here, no request is made. Here, there is only listening, quiet, receptive listening for the still, small voice that does not speak in language, but in assurance. And so, this pause becomes the cornerstone of your spiritual practice. Before meetings, before decisions, before conversations, before responding to anything in your outer life, you learn to take this moment, this effortless turning within, and wait until the sense of presence fills your awareness. This is not idleness. It is the highest form of activity. For in that moment, you have stepped out of the world of appearances and into the realm where God is the only power, the only presence, the only activity. Here, the human story quiets and the divine story begins to unfold. In this pause, the inner sanctuary opens and grace finds its way into your experience, not because you have invited it, but because you have stopped blocking it. As the pause deepens and the mind relaxes its constant activity, a remarkable thing begins to take place, so gentle, so unobtrusive, that one might easily overlook it if one were expecting something dramatic. When thought ceases its restless movement, even for a breath, conscious awareness begins to dawn. Not the awareness of the mind, not the awareness of concepts or beliefs, but the awareness of presence of a living, vibrant reality that has always been here. In this state, you may find that nothing in particular is happening. There is no vision, no voice, no sudden revelation, yet beneath the quiet surface, an inner movement is occurring. Something within you begins to stir, like a faint glow in the depths of consciousness. You are becoming aware of an invisible activity, not because you are thinking about it, but because you have made room for it by ceasing to think. This is the beginning of spiritual realization. When thought stops, the mind is no longer projecting its fears, its hopes, its conclusions, or its judgments onto the screen of your experience. And because those projections quiet, you can begin to sense what has been behind them all along, the presence that is your actual life, the life that is God expressing as you. This awareness is not created by meditation. It is not manufactured by effort. It is revealed the moment you no longer block it with thought. It is as though clouds have parted, not because you pushed them away, but because you simply stopped stirring the atmosphere of the mind. And when the atmosphere clears, the sun that was always shining becomes visible. In this awareness, the burdens you carry begin to lose their weight, not because they have been solved, but because you are beginning to sense another within you who carries all things. The fear that has gripped you begins to loosen, not because you have reasoned your way out of it, but because you are beginning to feel the presence of one who knows no fear. The confusion that clouded your judgment begins to dissolve, not because you have fought your way into clarity, but because clarity itself is beginning to arise within you. You see, consciousness, true consciousness, is not thought. It is not sensation. It is not emotion. It is the silent recognition of God's presence. This recognition may come as peace, or as a quiet confidence, or simply as a sense of rightness, of being aligned with something greater than your personal sense of self. Do not analyze it. Do not attempt to hold it. Do not try to deepen it. Simply rest in it, even if only for a breath. For this awareness, however small it may seem, is the beginning of spiritual power. In this moment of recognition, the presence of God becomes the healer, the harmonizer, the source. You do nothing, you think nothing, you demand nothing. You simply witness the activity of grace. This is the birth of conscious awareness, the awareness that there is a life within you that is not dependent on thought, that functions perfectly without your guidance, and that reveals itself whenever you are still enough to feel it. This awareness is the real work of the infinite way. It is the essence of spiritual living. And as it grows, you will find that it becomes the foundation of your daily experience, quietly transforming every aspect of your life, not through effort, but through presence. Now, let us bring this teaching into the rhythm of daily living. For unless truth becomes the atmosphere in which we move from morning until night, it remains merely an idea. The question naturally arises, how do we live in this world, with its demands and appearances, without returning to the old habit of mental effort and strain? And the answer is beautifully simple. We learn to pause, to rest, and to trust the presence that has begun to reveal itself within us. As you go about your day, you will meet many situations that appear to require immediate reaction, decisions to be made, conversations to be held, conditions to be faced. Ordinarily, the mind leaps forward at once, seeking to analyze, interpret, defend, or control. Yet in our spiritual life, we do none of these things. Instead, we bring to each circumstance the same sacred pause we have practiced in meditation. Before answering a question, pause. Before forming an opinion, pause. Before judging a condition, pause. Before reacting to a disturbance, pause. In that pause, you are doing something profound. You are refusing to let the mind govern your experience. You are stepping aside so that the presence may act. And in that simple act of stepping aside, the entire situation begins to shift, not necessarily outwardly at first, but inwardly, which is where all true change originates. Let us take an example. Suppose you are faced with a difficult conversation, perhaps a relationship strained, a business problem, or a moment of misunderstanding. The human instinct is to prepare mentally, to rehearse, to defend, to strategize. But you will discover that any preparation of the mind only adds weight to the situation. Instead, take a moment to become still, turn within, and silently acknowledge, Father, thou goest before me. In that moment, you are not asking for anything to happen. You are recognizing that the presence, already active, is the only intelligence operating in the encounter. You enter the meeting without burden, without tension, without defensiveness, and you will be amazed, truly amazed, at how harmony unfolds when you take your hands off the controls of the mind. Or consider a moment of fear. Most people attempt to think their way out of fear, reasoning, analyzing, arguing with themselves, repeating positive ideas. But fear is not healed by thought. Fear is dissolved by presence. And so, when fear arises, you do not push it away. You do not argue with it. You do not attempt to replace it with affirmations. You simply pause and remember, this fear has no power. Only God is power. Then you rest quietly, without effort, until even the faintest sense of inner peace breaks through. That peace, not your thought, is the healing. And what of financial concerns? Again, the mind wants to calculate, to predict, to worry, to seek security through planning and control. Yet all such activity testifies to the belief that supply is outside of you. In our work, we pause long enough to remember that supply is the activity of grace, not the result of human planning. We bring no mental struggle to it. We bring silence. And in that silence, the invisible source begins to reveal avenues of supply that you could never have imagined through thought. In each of these situations, the same principle applies. Do not think your way through life. Feel your way through life. Feel the presence. Rest in it. Let it go before you. Let it reveal the next step. Let it resolve every appearance. As you cultivate this way of living, you will notice something extraordinary happening. Life begins to unfold without strain. Problems that once seemed heavy begin to lighten. Decisions that once seemed complicated become simple. Conflicts soften, often without words. And you discover that the presence, which once seemed a momentary experience in meditation, is now becoming the atmosphere of your entire life. This is not inactivity. It is divine activity. This is not passivity. It is receptivity. It is the recognition that the same presence you touch in meditation is the presence that walks into your conversations, guides your hands in your work, surrounds you in your relationships, and goes before you in every situation you meet. In this way, spiritual living becomes natural. It is no longer practiced in isolation, but woven into the fabric of your day. You live without mental strain because you are no longer depending on the mind for direction. You are depending on the presence. And the presence never fails. As we come into the heart of this work, the entire purpose of our practice begins to reveal itself. All the silence, all the pausing, all the resting from thought is not an end in itself. These are merely the conditions in which a deeper realization may take place, a realization that is the very foundation of spiritual life. And that realization is this: God is the only power. This truth is not attained through effort. It is not reached through argument. It dawns only when the mind grows quiet enough for reality to reveal itself. You will notice that as the mind becomes still, even briefly, a subtle sense of presence arises. That presence is not merely peaceful. It carries with it a quality of authority, not human authority, but divine assurance. In its light, you begin to see that what you feared never possessed power, what you struggled against never possessed substance, and what you attempted to heal never possessed reality. You are not learning that God is the greatest power. You are realizing that God is the only power, and therefore that anything appearing to oppose him is nothing more than the shadow cast by human belief. When this realization dawns, even partially, the entire landscape of your inner life changes. You no longer try to overcome evil. You see that evil has no power. You no longer strive to attract good. You see that good is already present as the activity of the infinite. You no longer petition God to intervene in human affairs. You realize that God is the very presence in which those affairs unfold. The sense of separation dissolves, and with it, the belief in conflicting powers. In this awareness, the world loses its terror. Conditions lose their threat. People lose their power over you. Disease, lack, and conflict lose the authority you once unknowingly granted them. This is not denial of appearances. It is the recognition that behind the appearance is the invisible presence, undisturbed, unmoved, all-powerful, and wholly complete. And so, as you go about your day, you begin to meet each circumstance with this quiet recognition. This thing has no power. The only power is the presence of God. You are not saying it to convince yourself. You are not repeating it to change the condition. You are acknowledging what has been revealed in the silence, that only God is power. And in that recognition, harmony begins to appear, not as something created, but as something revealed. For where God is realized, the appearance of discord cannot stand. Where the presence is felt, fear dissolves. Where the one power is known, all supposed second powers fade into nothingness. This is the mystical secret at the heart of all healing and all spiritual demonstration, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit. As this realization becomes established in your consciousness, not as theory, but as living awareness, you discover that the presence is not something you experience only in meditation. It walks before you. It accompanies you. It surrounds you. It expresses itself through your thoughts, your words, your actions, your very being. You find that you are no longer living life alone. You are living as an instrument of the one power. This realization does not make you invincible in a human sense. It makes you transparent to the presence that is doing the work. You no longer try to direct, to force, or to shape your experience. You let the presence go before you. You trust it. You rest in it. And through this resting, you discover the freedom that comes from knowing that all power is in God and none is in appearances. This is the mystical consciousness. This is the fruit of stillness. This is the awakening that occurs when thought ceases and the presence is allowed to be what it is. And now, as we bring this period of inner contemplation to a close, let us not imagine that we are stepping away from anything. We are not leaving a sacred space, nor are we returning to a world separate from the presence we have touched here. The truth we have considered does not live in this room, nor in these words. It lives in the quiet within you. It is that same quiet to which you may return at any moment, in any place, without preparation and without effort. Let us carry with us the realization that nothing we have discovered today is dependent upon thought nor upon the activity of the mind. The peace you have felt, the assurance that has begun to stir within you, these are not the results of my speaking or your listening. They are the natural radiation of the presence that has always been the life of your being. We merely quieted ourselves long enough to feel it. As you move back into the rhythm of your daily experience, resist the impulse to think that you must hold on to this truth, or protect it, or maintain it by mental effort. The truth does not need your protection. The presence does not need your vigilance. Simply remember that it is here closer than breath, nearer than thought, and that whenever the mind becomes still, even for the briefest moment, the activity of grace reveals itself anew. Go about your tasks gently, without strain, without haste. Let the pauses return to you throughout the day. A moment before speaking, a moment before acting, a moment before judging. These simple pauses are not interruptions. They are reminders. Reminders that you do not live by your own power, nor by the strength of your mind. You live by the life of God within you. Do not be concerned if the peace seems to fade, or if the mind begins again with its familiar patterns. Simply pause, turn within, and rest. The presence has not left you. It never does. Only the mind wanders. And when the mind wanders, let it wander. You do not need to bring it back. You need only become aware of the stillness beneath it, and you will discover that the presence was there all along. And so, I leave you with this assurance. There is a place within you where thought cannot enter, where fear cannot touch, where the world cannot reach. It is the place where God is realized as the only life, the only power, the only presence. Go there often, not with effort, but with willingness, and you will find that the whole of your life begins to unfold under grace. May this silence go before you. May it remain with you, and may it reveal within you the fullness of the life that is God.